Greetings, I'm Keith Klein, the host of the VentureFizz podcast, where I interview the most fascinating people in the tech scene. This is episode 388, and today's guest is Andy Ellner, founder and CEO of Quilt Health. Yes, there are endless possibilities in terms of the platform shift to AI and how it will disrupt industries, but the one that I'm most excited about is the healthcare industry. Could there be a greater moment to hopefully improve lives and maybe even eradicate diseases or even cure cancer someday? The future is unknown, but these advancements in technology certainly give a lot of hope. To tackle these big problems, we need people who are not only the top brilliant minds on this planet, but they also need to be risk takers in terms of building these companies. Andy fits the bill. Not only is he an MD with top academic credentials, but he's also a serial entrepreneur. And probably the most important quality of Andy is that he comes from a medical family that's passionate about making a difference across the world. And that quality is deeply rooted into his mindset as well. His latest company is Quilt Health, a digital health company dedicated to bridging gaps in treatment access for complex diseases. They are focused on sickle cell disease and plan to expand to address other complex conditions. Quilt Health just announced a $6 million seed round of funding led by Mac Venture Capital and Underscore Ventures, with participation from Meridian Street Capital, Box Group, Watershed VC, and Coalition Operators. In this episode of our podcast, we cover lots of great topics, like some key lessons learned while building healthcare startups, including the importance of finding the right business model, Andy's background story, including his connection to the Baseball Hall of Fame, and his work helping to solve the global HIV pandemic, where his learnings from this time frame have also carried over to Quilt Health, co-founding the Harvard Medical School Center for Primary Care, starting Firefly Health to address the inefficiencies of primary care with a virtual first care model, what led him down the path of starting Quilt Health and their plans for disrupting the industry, his minimum viable team philosophy and advice around hiring, what excites him about the potential AI use cases in the healthcare industry, and so much more. Okay, quick side note. It's hard to believe that we have over 380 episodes of the VentureFizz podcast. We have built up an amazing catalog of inspirational stories around building companies, and every episode includes lots of great advice to follow as well. If you haven't checked out our past interviews, go to venturefizz.com/podcast for the complete list, where you can also filter guests based on industry, stage, various topics, and more. Oh, and one ask, please share the VentureFizz podcast with your friends and colleagues in the industry. I appreciate all of your support. All right, without further ado, here's my interview with Andy. Andy, thanks so much for joining us.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to talk to you because we're going to talk about innovation in healthcare, and there's such a massive opportunity to disrupt healthcare in so many different ways, which you've been building multiple companies. You're on your new one now, which we're going to talk about. But based on building companies in the healthcare industry, I would imagine there's constant learning. I mean, there's learning for just entrepreneurship in general, but in healthcare, it's got to be even more extraordinary. So I just want to get your feedback on building, companies in the healthcare industry, and what are these lessons learned that you've kind of captured along the way?
Yeah, there's lots of lessons in healthcare, and there's lots of lessons in just startups and organizations in general. I would say, like, starting with the latter, starting with just building another company is like just the basics, honestly. It's like being really intentional around putting the founding team together, like, who are the right pieces at the right time, finding the right chemistry of folks, and then positioning them to succeed. So I think that's true. I think that's true in any industry, any company. And then in healthcare, again, I don't know how much this is specific to healthcare or not, but there's no shortage of great product ideas about how to make healthcare better, how to make the experience better for patients, for doctors, for anyone else. Everyone's had experience with it. Everyone has frustrations. What's really hard in healthcare is finding business models that work, that, match to the, you can have a vision of, like, this is the product I want to build. This is how I want to improve the patient experience, make care better, help people's lives. But in healthcare, I think a lot of the rocket science of startups is just figuring out the right business model and matching that to the kind of problem space and the vision you have around the solution you want to build.
Yeah, I mean, two great points. The business model matters. You got to keep the lights on, and there's so many different entities involved in the healthcare system that it's complex. It's just a whole different layer, and it's regulated. And so, well, we're going to talk about some of those topics further down the path here in this conversation. But let's talk about your background story. So, where'd you grow up? What were you like as a child?
Yeah, so I grew up in Shaker Heights, a suburb of Cleveland. It's a really nice inner ring suburb around the city of Cleveland. Had kind of a funny childhood. I spent most of my time there, but we lived in Egypt a couple times. My I come from a medical family. My dad is a infectious diseases physician and researcher, and so when we were living in Egypt, he was studying schistosomiasis, which is a parasite that in fresh water, so in the Nile River. And my mom was getting a PhD in medical anthropology, so she was studying women's empowerment groups in Nile River villages. So I had this like kind of crazy childhood where I was exposed to really different cultures and settings and places. But then
Fascinating.
most of the time I was growing up in a beautiful suburb of Cleveland, and I was like shy kid, but loved sports. Like did all the different things, but particularly loved sports. Played a lot of baseball, ultimately some football, and yeah, it was really wonderful childhood.
So you've been a Cleveland sports fan of the Browns and the
Unfortunately, yeah, and even worse than that, I've made my kids Cleveland sports fans, which I live in Boston now, as you know, which like I don't think it was ever an intentional decision I made, but yeah, it's now my heart breaks twice whenever our team loses, which is too much of the time, as you know.
right. All right. So off to college. Where did you attend and what did you study?
Yeah, so I went to Harvard, Harvard College, and I had grown up in this very medical family, so I think like the way that I saw the world and maybe making an impact on the world was really shaped by that. So I think I always, without ever having thought a lot about it, I always just thought, oh, I guess I'm going to be a doctor, and that's the way I'm going to hopefully make a difference, make a living, things like that. But I figured as long as I knew that was my path, I could sort of do the minimum, science requirements, pre-med requirements that you need to do to go to medical school, but I might as well take the undergraduate and really explore other things. So I studied history and literature at Harvard, and yeah, just there have been times that I've thought about alternate careers, being a writer, being a journalist, things like that. But I'm really love literature, and I'd say history, particularly intellectual history. Yeah, so it's pretty amazing experience.
Yeah, I didn't even know that is something you could do. Meaning, like people that I know, mainly my kids that are in college now, they're friends. They want to potentially, go pre med, but they're studying biology and chemistry, right? So it's
Yeah.
deep in the sciences. But I like what you did.
Yeah, no, it felt like just a real opportunity. I remember, when I was in college, but now that my kids are, not in college, but be there soon enough. I just remember my mom would always say like college is wasted on the young, like it's just such an incredible opportunity to be exposed to different ways of thinking and this really interesting coursework. And so yeah, I was, fortunate enough to have the sense that I can figure out the medical school piece, but this is like a really cool opportunity to just study things that are interesting to me. And I ended up, I've always been interested. It sort of carried into my medical work, but I've always really been interested in inequality and the ways that it plays out in society, and history of sort of race relations and things like that. And so I actually, in my senior year, I had to write a thesis. I studied the history and literature of America. And so I had to write a thesis about, an in-depth topic. So I decided I was going to write about a guy named Larry Doby, he was the first African-American player in the American League of Major League Baseball. So everyone knows Jackie Robinson, right? But I was, I was aware of Larry Doby, having grown up in Cleveland, because he played for the, the Cleveland team, whose name has changed at this point to the Guardians. And it ended up being this amazing thing. So the thesis was about his experience in the major leagues, and about, the racism at the time, and sort of how it all played out. And as I was doing research, I actually found my way to meet him. I got in touch with him. He
Wow.
was still alive. And I both met, I met him, and then there was a academic at the nearby college in New Jersey that was close to his home. And that guy had written a biography of Larry Doby. And so I had this incredible experience where I just went to his, home in a suburb in, I think it was Montclair, New Jersey. And I interviewed him for like hours, just like sat there and hung out with him. And then this academic, I go into his office, and he gives me this box, and the box is full of tapes. And I go home, and on the, just remember old school tapes.
Yeah,
Uh,
of course.
he had interviewed, like, name the baseball great from the late 1940s and 1950s. He had like live interview material with like all of these guys, like hours and hours and hours. He just gave me this box basically. So anyway, I ended up it was an unbelievable experience. And yeah, it's neat to have that opportunity as a college student.
Well, it sounds like a great 30 for 30 on ESPN type of
Yeah. Well,
documentary.
it's funny. So now my son is in Little League, and one of his coaches last summer said, "Andy, I saw you wrote your senior thesis about Larry Doby," and I was like, "What? Like, what are you talking about? Like, how do you know about this?" So it turns out that a journalist has written a book that, very similar, like much more extended treatment, and but about essentially the same thing, about, Larry Doby and the integration of the American League of Baseball. And he had found my thesis, because my thesis had found its way to Cooperstown, New York, to the Baseball Hall of
What?
Fame.
Wait, what?
It's like,
What?
yeah, it's just
No one
crazy.
told you?
No one told me. I had no idea. And it's just like, they have a file on Larry Doby, and in the file is my thesis. And so this guy, wrote the book, and he cites me, and yeah. And then we're gonna have to talk about companies at some point, but like, it's a weird story, because it turned out that one of my college roommates has written a pretty famous book about baseball. It's like a novel called The Art of Fielding. And it's a big book, about almost 15 years ago now. His next book's coming out soon. And it turned out that he had the guy who wrote the book about Larry Doby, my roommate, had given him his first opportunity in journalism. Like he gave him an
Wow,
opportunity. So
full
like,
circle. Like,
he
I tell
he
my
knew
kids all the time, the
he
world is
knew
so small, and that
yeah
is proof. Like,
he knew this guy. He like put us in touch. Like, I was like, oh my God, like it was just fun small world moment.
that is such a cool story. See, this is why I love this podcast, because I unearth something just completely random where I'm like, what? Wait, not only is this a great entrepreneur, but he has a connection into Cooperstown Hall of Fame.
Very, not quite the one I imagined when I, was like growing up as a baseball player, but I'll take it.
All right. Well, I guess in the essence of time, which amazing story that I obviously want to retain in this interview. I don't want to short sight the rest of your academic career, but we might have to go a little
No,
bit
it's not as
faster through that.
interesting.
Well,
Yeah.
but you did go on to medical school, and
Yeah. So, I mean, the thread runs through a little bit from the thesis, in the sense of like, I was really interested in, as I started getting into healthcare, I was really interested in basically the system of care and how it plays out. As even before medical school, I participated in research that was looking into inequalities in the way that, Black people are treated versus white people, or women versus men, or people of lower socioeconomic status to higher socioeconomic status. So like the thread for me, as I went through medical school and into practice was, it was kind of like, man, all this is really screwed up. It's like where you started. It's like this system is so broken, and it's broken for everyone. It's broken in different ways for different people, but it plays out in really differential ways that people are treated. No one's treated well, but some people are treated even worse than other people. And I got really interested in essentially, how do we get everyone in the world access to good healthcare, right? And so, like, what is the system that produces that? And how do I, then build a career to address that? And so I went through, I'm what's called Preparation H, which is just, it's a awful way of referring to people who trained at Harvard all the way through, undergraduate medical school, and medical residency. So I went to Harvard Medical School. I actually, spent a couple years while I was, in medical school. I took some time away. I went to London. I got a master's degree in health policy and economics. Entrepreneurship really wasn't on the map when I was kind of coming up in medicine. And so people like me who were interested in systems and access to care, we kind of channeled ourselves towards health policy, basically, like, so more thinking about like macroeconomic policies or payment policies or, things like that. And so I went to London. I got a master's degree in health policy and economics. I had other experiences during medical school. I worked in Ted Kennedy's health office, on the Hill, just kind of being exposed to policy. I went to medical residency. I thought I was going to do a PhD in economics, basically, because again, like I just didn't have this frame of like, I'm really interested in kind of how to fix the system, but entrepreneurship just wasn't a thing. And so I kind of went through training, feeling really critical of the way that the system was and how we were serving patients, and, just felt like it was kind of broken for everyone. And thinking that, I would sort of focus on policy or do research or things like that, but none of that ever really felt like a fit. I went through medical residency, and it does all kind of relate to the work I'm doing now. So it's worth kind of hitting a few pieces of this, but as I was coming through medical school and residency, this was, about 20 years ago now, more than 20 years ago. And there was a global HIV pandemic, basically. So, people, mainly mainly in lower socioeconomic status countries, sub-Saharan Africa being hardest hit than most other countries, but certainly parts of Asia, other parts of the world. There's this huge epidemic that was taking off. And meanwhile, there were treatments, that were coming online that worked, but there was, at that point, there was, the sort of medical innovation that had come through was really just out of reach to, most people in the world because of cost, because the systems didn't exist to, treat people for complex medical illness in really poor parts of the world. And so my mentors at the time were very involved in the efforts to basically prove that you could, in places like Haiti or, in parts of sub-Saharan Africa, that you can treat people, and achieve the same outcomes, treating them with antiretrovirals for HIV/AIDS as you could achieve in, America or Europe or, developed economies, basically. And there was this whole kind of global movement of scaling up the response to treating HIV and other diseases worldwide that then had the privilege to be involved with as I was coming through medical training and then the early part of my time on the faculty at Harvard. And so, we were just kind of doing work. The work I was doing, honestly, was really focused on that first part of my career on like all of this funding was coming in to to really give people access to medicines for conditions like HIV, but it was in places where there was no capacity to treat really, most conditions, basically. Like there was very limited healthcare systems capacity. And so a lot of the work I did was, essentially how do you leverage all of this funding coming in to build broader systems capacity? And so, but, honestly learned a ton from that early phase in my career that I'm bringing back around to the current company Quilt, which I'm sure we'll get to.
Well, there's two things that I'm thinking about as you're talking. It's just like the companies you've built weren't just random ideas. Like these are things that you've been thinking about. But that's where you see the best entrepreneurs. It's something that they're obsessed about. It's something that they have a vision and they can't sleep because they think it's something that can change the world. So that's one. Two, I'm like, have you ever met Bono? like it just like it just sounds like so he's top of mind
one
because
degree of separation. I'm not
yeah,
that cool, but like
okay.
I mean, my mentors were a guy named Paul Farmer, passed away, in 2022. I wrote about it in my blog post, but another guy named Jim Kim, who was president of the World Bank. And like they were literally, I think Jim was in Vogue, like the magazine at the
Yeah.
time.
The
And
fashion magazine.
it was like him and Madonna. Cause it was like,
Hmm.
this was,
Yeah, the red campaign and
they were rock stars, like this was a global movement. So I haven't, but my mentors have.
well, it just so yeah, I'm a YouTube fan, but he, Bono published his book Surrender, which I read, which was amazing. He talks about it, and then he just released his book tour special on Apple. So I watched that last night. So that's why it's like super
Wow.
top of mind. And if I mean, you would probably find it really interesting because a lot of
Loved it.
his
Yeah.
yeah, like his book talks about what he was trying to do to eliminate, the debt from Africa and you know, how George Bush did that. And it was like, and just making different parties come together to solve these world problems like poverty and HIV. So anyways,
And that's like when you're like the kind of nerd I am, which is like really obsessively focused on like what is a healthcare system or like what is a system, that leads to health outcomes and things like that. Turns out that like those things matter, right? Social mobilization, political campaigns, and I mean Bono's was a genius, and he was a really important part of that story.
and we're going to talk about one of the relatives of the Bush family pretty soon too.
Yes,
So there's that
we
connection
absolutely are.
too. So
Yeah.
okay, so um, now you co-founded the Center for Primary Care at Harvard Medical School. So what is that?
Yeah, so the center, so we started working on what became the Harvard Medical School Center for Primary Care in about 2009, 2010, and it was, a lot of it was really about there's been, I think so much of what's wonderful about healthcare in the United States, in places like Harvard Medical School, is this incredible biomedical innovation, like this just incredible um acceleration in understanding disease processes at the every level, including the molecular level, and then developing new drugs, new devices, new ways of preventing, diagnosing, treating illness. And a lot of what the sort of work that led up to starting the Center for Primary Care was like, that's all amazing. Where there's a lot of opportunity here is in the systems that kind of get like this incredible innovation to people and that support people, in their day-to-day lives to, you know, behave in ways that lead to better health, to adhere to treatment plans, to, use the healthcare system in the right way, things like that. And a lot of the work that, led to the Center for Primary Care was like, it's, like we had a like a slide with like a scale, right? And it's like, the biomedical innovation, very little systems innovation. And so a lot of that work was about, how do we start thinking about, training, really understanding, primary care in its essence is really about the foundation of a healthcare system that works, basically. And so it was about like both how do you, even understand at more of an operational level, like what is good primary care? How does it work? Where are there examples of it working well? And then, how would you do the things that work in ways that really scale, basically? And so the center was both about, really trying to learn and understand what great primary care looks like, but then also how do we train the future leaders who are going to work in and lead, better models of care, basically.
All right, so let's talk about Firefly. How did the idea come to fruition and go off on this path of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so I had that the Center for Primary Care was really, in many ways my first startup. I think I've probably always been an entrepreneur. And it, so it was the first organization I had the opportunity to build. It was an incredible experience. And after, sort of 4 or 5+ years building, it was in an academic context and it was working with big hospitals. And I had sort of had the privilege of learning about these incredible models of primary care around the world and like sort of seeing bits and pieces of like what I thought, great scalable primary care would look like. And then meanwhile, we're working with real, existing practices in hospitals and in health centers and things like that. And it was just, we weren't able to go fast enough. It felt very incremental, basically. And so I just got to the point, it was a combination of that. And then, people ask me like, what was that moment where you decided that it was time to leave? And, I have to say it was when I won't even say the name of the medical record system, but my hospital implemented a new medical record system. And, what became really clear to me, I think the sort of thinking and work that led to Firefly was really like what's broken in healthcare is how doctors and other healthcare workers work. It's like how they spend their time, how their day is organized, how they interact with patients, other team members, things like that. And what was happening, the way this sort of early wave of electronic health records was designed is really like they were kind of setting in stone what was like the wrong way of organizing the work of delivering primary care, basically. Like it was sort of like it was like kind of creating this structure where clinicians just all day were seeing patients in person, right? And like, the reality was I would be, going, I think you might have read a blog I wrote, but at the time, but it was like, I'm seeing 10, 15 patients in a session. Some of these people, if they have a job, they're taking a day off from work to come in. If like, if they don't have a job or they don't have enough money, like they don't have a car, they're taking multiple buses to get here. And it's like 9 out of 10 of these people didn't even need to come in for this visit. And meanwhile, we've kind of implemented this technology system that's just setting in stone. This is the way we're doing things, basically. And so I just felt like I can't sort of build the right model here. And so I decided to leave and start working on Firefly. And a lot of those, is between the sort of inspiration of learning about some of the best models around the world, which are many of them are not. I think a lot of what we figured out how to do at Firefly was inspired by learning about models that are shifting a lot of care from visits, not just in-person visits, but even like any kind of visit, a video visit, like a synchronous interaction to more of a continuous interaction. And if you think about something like primary care, where you're trying to support people to, do the things they need to do to be healthy, to, do screening tests, to manage chronic conditions like hypertension or diabetes, so much of what's needed is really more of this longitudinal continuous support, a lot of which can be done asynchronously rather than in visits. And so that was a lot of the, what we need to do pushes the boundaries much further, much faster. We need to like get out, sort of be building in a more, sort of a space that has less, structure in it, and then build the technology on the workflows that actually make sense.
And for timing, this was 2017, right? So this was before, the pandemic and telemedicine became very fluid in everybody's world. So what was it like building that? And so I just want to kind of tie back the story of, so how did you end up working with your co-founder, Jeff Greenberg, and then Jonathan Bush was involved too, right?
Totally. So Jeff, I knew from, he was at the same hospital as me, and we were friends. And it's funny, we don't have enough time to get into all the details, but when I started thinking about doing it, I was just talking to everyone I could to try to, I didn't know how to start a company, didn't know anything about finance, all this stuff. And so, we had known each other for a long time, but so a sort of mutual colleague had said, "Oh, Andy's thinking about doing this thing. Jeff, you should really talk to him," because Jeff had been doing a lot of work for the physicians organization at the hospital, and had both kind of innovation work, digital health innovation, but also thinking about different payment models and things like that. So someone put us together, and we started working together at that point. And then, Jonathan along the way. So I knew Jonathan because he was on the what's called the Board of Fellows of Harvard Medical School, which is like it's more it tends to be people who have been very successful, people who, the administration of the medical school is genuinely looking for their guidance, but also those people tend to have the capacity to make donations to the medical school. And so when a new fellow joins, they usually try to introduce them to a faculty member who they think they're going to get along with, basically. And so the dean of the medical school, who I had become close with, I was like the guy that Jonathan was put in touch with when he joined the board. And I think he had joined, this was years before I decided to do Firefly, but he kind of met me, and I think he was like, yeah, I like this guy, Andy. Like he's interesting. He thinks in interesting ways, but he's just going to go off to Africa and, save the world. So, like it was nice, but, we didn't stay in close touch, but we would kind of catch up every once in a while. And then when I started thinking about building the company, I started having conversations with him as, just obviously one of the icons, one of the real trailblazers of innovation and healthcare and health technology. Lucky for me, he would always take the time to speak with me, and we just got closer and closer. And then what ended up happening, this is ancient history at this point, but I think it was around 2018, was he ended up leaving Athena, and he had more time on his hands, basically. And I think he had been, I think he would say one of the kind of main areas of healthcare innovation he was interested in is like virtual primary care, basically. Like he had sort of seen the need for it, and I was working on it, and he had time, and who's going to say no to Jonathan Bush if they're interested in spending time with you and helping you build your health tech startup.
Yeah, and just in case people don't recognize what he's accomplished, I mean, Athena Health, he built that from scratch, took it public, and he was in an interview on my podcast that I'll link to in the show notes, so people can
Awesome.
listen to that whole
Yeah,
background
no,
story. And working on Zeus Health now. So, all right, so Firefly, let's talk about like what you built and kind of what it grew to.
absolutely. Yeah, so a lot of what we did sort of stems from that insight of there are things that people really value in primary care, and then there's a lot of like approaches that were just we sort of did over time because that's what we always did, or that's how we got paid, or things like that. But what people really value is that kind of human experience of like, there's a doctor or there's a team of people that's my team. They're taking care of me. They're helping me stay healthy. They're, who I go to when I get sick. And so a lot of what we kind of figured out and solved for is, how do you enable a team of people with technology to provide much more of the service of primary care asynchronously, so over chat. We had the ability to share care plans with patients, just to support them to manage their conditions or do preventative care, things like that. So we built a technology platform that enables a team to provide really high quality ongoing care for patients, basically. And the technology we built essentially sits on top of an electronic health record, is integrated from a data scheduling perspective, but it really enables moving more and more of care to this. We always said, like, at the beginning, the experience should be like you had a doctor or nurse in your family, and you need something. So what are you going to do? You're just going to send them a text message, right? And that's kind of the experience that we built for people to have. And so it's both like, it has that consumer grade, when I need something, it gets taken care of quickly and reliably. But then it also has that relationship of, this is my doctor, this is my team of people who are taking care of me. And then it has like, we always follow up on things. If, we always check in on you. It's like, it sort of flips the model. So it's proactive, it's continuous. It, doesn't require you to do visits when you don't need them. And it's closed loop. We don't drop any balls. So we built and validated that, the technology works, patients love it. The care team loves it. The clinical outcomes are a lot better. It looks, we can save money on total cost of care by helping people avoid things they don't need, and going to high quality, reasonably priced services when they do need something. And so once we had sort of validated that model, we then went, and Faye, who's CEO now, I credit her a lot with this kind of evolution of the packaging of what we were offering. Faye really led a process of saying, okay, this all makes sense, but it really needs to be packaged as a health plan, basically. So it needs to be like a virtual Kaiser, if you will. And so we learned over time that the kind of the right packaging, the right, product was this, virtual Kaiser, if you will, or newfangled HMO that a self-insured employer can provide as a benefit to their employees, either as a slice offering alongside their, more traditional Blue or United plan, or as a complete replacement for their health plan for their employees.
Massive undertaking to build that. Yeah, because it's like, it's not for the faint of heart. You got tech, you've got so many different parties involved. There's like the treatment, there's, like the facilities, like, like to pull this off, like, so you obviously went on and raised. So I think the last round was a $40 million Series B in 2021 from Andreessen Horowitz and Julie Yu. Yeah, it's a big undertaking, but obviously a big swing.
It's a big swing. We've had just Julie, the round before that was Carl Byers from F Prime and Nancy Brown from Oak. And, we've just it's just an all-star board of investors and, people who really saw the need for this and believed in it and kind of helped to nurture it along. So it's been a, incredible experience, great group of people, both on the team side and on the investor and board side.
All right, so you're working on a new company now. How did you know it was time to go do something else? Like so Quilt Health, like what is that, and what led you down the...
Yeah, I think you were sort of alluding to this in comments you made earlier, just about like, in some ways, I think the problems I've been thinking about my whole, like, in some ways since my childhood,
Right.
but yeah, like I started kind of thinking about, even at Firefly, Firefly it's like the experience for patients is awesome. We're able to have a huge impact on our patients. It's, it's people who have commercial insurance, basically, who get insurance through their employees. So it's a range of, the very healthy to the very sick, but it's kind of a range. And a lot of what I was starting to think about was, hey, I think a lot of what we figured out could have a huge impact for people with really high complexity chronic medical conditions, like particularly conditions from childhood, like sickle cell disease, which is a focus of Quilt. There's certainly many other examples of this, where, it's a huge part of people's lives. If, they have to touch healthcare a lot. And there's so many opportunities to make that experience and the care and the outcomes better. So I started getting interested in how could we, build something that would support people with these conditions. The other thing I was really interested in, for a variety of reasons, was really about data, basically. So, I think some of these things are like deep frustration, but like, I've always been frustrated about, as a clinician, the data that I have accessible to me about how a patient's doing over time it's not nearly as good as it could be, right? And it's often, I'm often doing a lot of work just to figure out what the heck is going on. And it's hard to find the data. And then there's this big separation between what I'm doing in clinical care and then what's called research, where it's like someone goes and, cleans up a data set completely separately, has no connection back to care. And it's done in a very inefficient way. And so what I was getting really interested in is there a way to basically start curating high quality data sets in the context of care delivery? And so bringing these things much closer together, bringing research and care together, bringing really high quality data into the point of care. So those were the kind of problems that I was getting interested in. And then as I started looking at the space and trying to figure out how to build a business, the big kind of light bulb was there are these incredible therapies for conditions like sickle cell disease, all of these conditions. There's a gene therapy for sickle cell disease. It's not fully curative, but it's more or less seems to be functionally a cure for the disease. And so, having taken care of people with this condition early in my career, it's mind blowing. These types of treatments are now available to people. And it's not just in sickle cell disease. There's this huge pipeline of transformative therapies. If you look at orphan drugs, the market is growing from, call it 250 billion to over 500 billion in terms of the investment on the therapeutic side in the next 10 years. And so there's a huge pipeline. It's getting bigger. Meanwhile, there's been no attention paid to the incredibly fragmented, broken approach to caring for these conditions, right? So the experience is still, of the patient who has, you name the condition, sickle cell disease, muscular dystrophy, Huntington's disease, whatever it is, certainly various forms of cancer. The experience of the patient is still, disconnected, uncoordinated. Your data is all over the place. And so what I saw was like a pattern, basically. Like it was the same thing as global HIV. We had these incredible therapies that were way too expensive and inaccessible to most people who could benefit from the therapy. And then we had this completely broken system for how you get the therapies to people. And I just thought like, this is what I'm supposed to do, honestly. And I think for me, it really, I think the right way to start a company is to be just like, you can't not do it. Basically, like there's just a problem that you're so interested in, and an emerging solution that you're so excited about, that I sort of draw the comparison to when I was in medical school. People would say like, how do you know if you should be a surgeon? And the answer was, well, if there's nothing you'd rather be doing at 3 a.m. on a Saturday morning than operating, basically. Yeah, I think it's kind of like, building a company, like doing a startup, it's a pain in the ass. Like, there's a lot of hard parts of it. And like, you just have to like be, there's nothing I'd rather be, except for my family, there's nothing I'd rather be thinking about at 3 a.m. on a Saturday morning than like, how do we solve these problems? And we can have a huge impact on people. And there's a huge, incredible business opportunity as well. And so that's really where it clicked to start the company.
All right. So you recently announced funding. So where's the business now? Like, are you still in the really early stages of building this out, or are you in market, or?
We are really turning the corner. We're having a lot of fun. Like we're just at a really exciting phase where I think the concept is crystallizing, and I'm sort of calling it like the product market maelstrom, where we're in market in the sense that we're building a software solution that we expect both clinicians and patients to interact with. And so, really for a quarter now, we've been kind of talking to more and more clinicians and health systems as we build the prototype for the software. And so, we're close to landing our first couple health system partners. We've been getting awesome feedback from patients who could benefit from this solution. We announced, as you probably saw, a partnership with easily the largest hematology network in the country, an alliance of 115 sickle cell centers across the country, which is basically many of them are hematology divisions at hospitals all over the country. And so we're kind of building in market clinicians, starting to kind of interact with the software. And as we're doing that, we're crystallizing the business model basically, which, there's several different opportunities we see to support basically getting these incredible new therapies to patients. So, there's opportunities to support enrollment in clinical trials for people with these conditions. There's opportunities to support prescription processing, basically prior authorizations, prescription refills, everything related to getting people on therapies and helping them stay on therapies. And then there's kind of an emerging ecosystem around supporting these cell and gene therapies, the cure that I was talking about for sickle cell disease. There's kind of an emerging paradigm around how we support people to get these therapies. And so, we're really like right in the thick of building this solution that will, we think, longitudinally engage and support patients and the clinicians taking care of them. And then from a business model perspective, make money by supporting several steps along the way of getting new therapies through trials and to patients after FDA approval.
Is that like the core right now, more that clinical trials, like, these drugs,
That's where
they're
we are
stuck?
now. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We sort of looked at we see opportunities all the way through that life cycle of therapy. But if you look across the landscape of conditions that we think we can build for, I'd say the majority of promising therapies are still in the development pipeline. They're still in the kind of, either preclinical or in clinical trials. And so as we looked at that, we said, we think the near term opportunity is to support helping these really accelerate the pace of clinical trials, which are mainly limited by identifying and enrolling the right patients for the trial. So, that's where we see the kind of near term and the go to market. Over time, we also see some of these other opportunities to support patients and generate revenue.
Like, are you growing the team, hiring?
All the things, we've got I've been calling it I've got I don't know if I've coined this. Have you heard MVT, minimum valuable team? Uh
No, but I hear a lot. It
yeah.
sounds very, very
You heard
current.
it here first.
All right.
Like we really I've been quite intentional and so just finding kind of the just incredible leaders across different functions. And I think, what the reality of building a company now is very different even than I think a couple of years ago, certainly, 8 years ago when we started Firefly, in terms of just how much just a few engineers can do, a few product leaders, a few designers. And so, we are a lean and very mighty team. I've also been calling it my ride or die team. I don't know if you watch Fast and the Furious, but it's like my son is 10, so we're watching all these movies, and that's a ride or die. But it's like this is the just awesome team to get us to product market fit.
Cool. Yeah, you mentioned this earlier that, I wanted to talk about, like, when we were first talking, you're like team, right? Hiring. So what's your philosophy around hiring that initial team? Because it's important. I mean, it could be catastrophic if you make a bad decision.
Yeah, I I think what I've learned is a couple things. One is to be really clear on what role is needed when, basically, and kind of wait till it hurts. Basically. So I think kind of sequencing is important. Like you don't want to hire people that aren't going to have something to do right away, basically. And so I think part of it is just, having I don't know if courage is the right word, but like just kind of holding back until you're really clear exactly what you need, what the role is, what you're hiring for. Number one. And then, just I think kind of practice it's important in any kind of recruitment or hiring, but like just finding people who are not only exceptional at that kind of function that they need to fill, but are just exceptional people, like people that you want in the foxhole with you. And, we have, I don't know if, I don't think it'll become a value we say out loud, but we kind of have a no assholes rule. Like,
Yeah,
we're
sure.
trying to do something, really hard, really fast that requires an incredible level of like cross-functional collaboration, basically. And I think what I've learned is like, you want to kind of put people in kind of the right lanes, make it really clear, what each of them is expected, and then you just want to find people that just have chemistry, basically, and we just like enjoy working together, have fun, like, but beyond that, are kind of capable of pushing each other, disagreeing, but in ways that don't create a lot of friction. Because you want the right amount of kind of conflict, working through stuff, but without that like kind of the friction of not helpful interpersonal disagreements, and people taking things personally, things like this. So I think it's finding that right balance of like hiring the right people at the right time, being clear what you need, and then really being intentional about finding people that you want to work with and that will work well together with each other.
AI, right? And just kind of looking at healthcare, there's so many use cases. What do you think are you mentioned with Firefly, being able to like just, text
Yep.
and, get a response
Yep.
instead of going into an office and sitting down and doing the whole thing. Like, where do you see AI playing a role kind of even in the short term? Like, I'm sure there's a broader or longer tail version, but
Yeah. I'm, I think I've sort of seen even in the last decade, like a lot of kind of buzzy moments about like different, blockchain and, different things. But I will say, like, I'm pretty won over. I think this is a different moment with large language models, and where we are now with AI. Um, you know, I don't think I have anything like brilliant that you haven't heard from other people or sort of thought about, but it's very it's very specific. Like I think some of the areas that I'm excited about. One is just basically it's like information retrieval. So I was sort of like saying to you, I think we can build this, and I think others are working on different versions of this, but like we are starting to figure out how you can essentially curate really high quality longitudinal data at the point of care. And a lot of the barrier around that is basically, you know, it's both like pulling from different parts of the medical record and, other data sources, but it's also accessing unstructured data and accessing the right parts of the unstructured data, so that you can, I think with a human in the loop for at least the foreseeable future, go from unstructured to really high quality structured data. And so it's the ability to process just enormous amounts of information much more efficiently, I think is for me, like clinically, is one of the most exciting use cases. And so, it's just, you have a really complicated patient. There's, tens of thousands of pages of medical records and other things, often what you're given by a fax, and a company I've helped with for health, like what they do is like take those 100,000 pages of medical records and give you a 2-page summary, right? And at Quilt, we're saying essentially these are the 50 structured fields you need to follow a patient with sickle cell disease. Right now clinicians are sitting on a Sunday when they have clinic the next day, like spending hours trying to like find those data in different parts of the medical record. I mean, it's crazy. Now, I think AI gives us the possibility to, bring all those data, not fully automated, right? Just surfacing it to the clinician. They're still going to see it and adjudicate what is, you need to protect against hallucinations and things like that. But I think so. I think it's processing enormous amounts of information much more efficiently, is just a huge one. A lot of these kind of basic administrative tasks, I think AI will help to support, with agents and other things that I think people are going to be happy to interact with. Streamlining a lot of the waste around just billing and like a lot of the mundane stuff, I think, which is just not these aren't good jobs for people. But right now they are jobs that, are leading to, a lot of spending in healthcare and friction and waste. I think there's opportunities to use AI, and help humans to sort of focus on the things that are, humans can uniquely do, basically. So I think there's huge potential.
Yeah, I mean, I would think this is going to strongly benefit the FDA in terms of their ability to process information to make decisions
Everyone.
on
Yeah.
drugs, right? Like,
Yeah, everyone. And I think, like, to sort of bring the analogy back to Quilt and what we're working on, you know, I like I think we have this sort of old idea of research, which is like this completely separate thing from clinical care, that we go and spend, millions and millions of dollars doing, like, because we have to go and clean up the data set and we need to like find the patients. And um, there is just, I think, an incredible opportunity to basically bring research and care together, and, be curating that kind of research grade data, which is a lot of what we're working on with partners and others in Quilt. It's just bringing that into the point of care, and bringing it into patient and clinician interactions, such that you could just dramatically speed up the processes of identifying the right patients for clinical trials, helping to support patients to enroll in trials, helping to get patients on the best therapies for them, helping to empower patients to know that, this is the kind of care you should be getting. Here's some trial opportunities for you to enroll in. There's just huge opportunity to help people access the right care at the right time and in new ways.
all right, three apps you can't live without, can't be Slack, email, or calendar.
Yeah, that was a good question. So the boring one is Spotify. The also boring one is Spot Hero. Like just being able to to um book parking spots easily. But the one that connects to startups more, I would say, is I use an app called Waking Up, which is, it's not just like a mindfulness app. It's a lot about sort of theory and practice of Buddhism. And I wouldn't say I'm like, sort of fully Buddhist, but for me, learning the techniques of meditation and mindfulness weren't as impactful until I really understood the theory behind it and the philosophy behind it, and how it connects to kind of startups and technology. Is, I think, the hardest part of building a startup is really managing the highs and lows, and the sort of emotional experience of it. And for me, in all facets of my life, certainly in, building companies, building Quilt, it's been really helpful, just to do mindfulness, to, really kind of bring some of this theory and practice of, being present, of managing emotions, managing your reactivity, to the fore of just, managing the team, to working with investors, things like this. It's really helped, honestly.
All right, cool. A new one that I haven't heard, so I'm going to check it out.
Check it
All
out.
right, how
Waking
about,
Up.
okay.
I have no stock.
All right, how about a good podcast or book recommendation?
Yeah. So, I think, the obvious one is, the hard things about hard things, I think, is still, is, and I can't remember the name of the other book that Ben Horowitz wrote, but, I think those are like, it is great. And then I think some of these podcasts like Peter Attia or Andrew Huberman, you know, I do think that there is now an incredible science around, how to be healthier, change your behaviors, sleep better, which is a big issue for me. I mentioned being awake at 3 a.m. Actually, I, it's not how I want to be. Like, I'm actually better as a founder and colleague when I have slept through the night. And so I found Andrew Huberman has some great episodes on sleep that I highly recommend.
All right, what do you like to do for fun outside of work?
I'm boring, like my kids are into sports, and, going to little league games, taking my daughter to soccer games. I'm a fitness nut. So just running, biking, things like that. And just, and literature, connecting to my old passions.
Cool. Well, Andy, thanks so much for taking the time to walk us through your background story, obviously all the great work that you're up to as an entrepreneur, and obviously all the great advice.
Thank you so much. This was really fun. I appreciate the opportunity.